Rain powdered the parking lot like sifted flour, turning the neon into smeared ribbons of cherry and mint across the puddles. Ronan Vale killed the engine of the matte black touring bike and let the silence sit a second longer than necessary, the way he always did before stepping into rooms that might turn sideways. He wasn't wearing his kilt tonight, only a denim overshirt, hood peeking from beneath the collar, a beanie tugged low. Nobody who wasn't looking too closely would guess the history stitched into the scars on his knuckles, or the badge number he still knew by heart, though it had been 10 months since he buried it in a desk drawer with the life attached to it. The bell over the diner door chimed. Coffee air. Bacon air. A jukebox whispering something older than the tired truckers in the corner. Ronan scanned without turning his head, the way instructors used to nag, note exits, count heads, list threats in your brain as softly as prayer. That's when he saw her, the waitress with a braid like wet rope and a smile trained to ride pain. She balanced a tray with her left hand. The right was tucked close to her apron like a wounded thing she didn't want the world to notice. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Ronan slid into the last booth where the wall met the window. He angled himself to watch the line to the register and the service door to the kitchen. The woman moved like someone compensating, hips taking more of the load, shoulders refusing to. Every time the cook shouted order up, she nodded without turning, a tiny tilt that said, I hear you, I'm fine, please don't make a scene. He hated that tilt. He recognized it from women who'd answered the door with sunglasses at night, and men who joked about stairway slips while their ribs bloomed purple. Recognition came like a taste, metal and memory. She arrived with a coffee pot and a glass of water as if he'd been here before and always ordered the same. Kitchen's backed up, she said, voice easy. Up close, the underside of her wrist wore the pale crescent of bad tape beneath the sleeve cuff. Take your time, he answered. I've got nowhere else I need to be. Not tonight. Not until the thing he hadn't told his sponsor about, this errand he'd chosen, either set him free or dragged him back under the same tides that had swallowed friends whose patches he still couldn't look at without a pulse of grief. Her name tag said Maria in block letters that had lost their shine. He let his eyes rest at her shoulder, respectful. You do splints, he said quietly, not a question. Her smile hiccuped. Trey bit me, she lied, then glanced at the kitchen window where a man with a neck like a stump flipped pancakes and watched her too hard. Mireya. The name folded itself around his tongue and stayed. He had a sister once whose name meant miracle, and he kept that thought on a hook in the back of his mind because thoughts like that could make you reckless if you held them too close. Eggs, over hard, he said so she'd have an excuse to walk away. Toast. Whatever's hot. Ronan watched the choreography of the room, the handshake between danger and routine. A pair of oilfield hands hunched over a plate. A busboy no older than 15 stacking red baskets. The stump-neck cook. The manager's office door with its security monitor flickering grayscale. And the man at the counter in a leather jacket too clean, leaning on his elbows like he owned the counter and everyone behind it. Every time Maria passed that man, her right shoulder angled, protective. The man's mouth moved but the smile never met his eyes. He tapped a spoon to the rim of his coffee cup, once, twice, 3 times, in a rhythm that felt like ownership. Ronan lifted the water, let the cold focus him. He didn't want to be the guy who walks into strangers' storms and appoints himself lightning. But sometimes a storm looked back and asked you who you were. The eggs arrived. They were perfect because she was the kind of person who did perfect for others even when her own world leaned wrong. She poured coffee left-handed like it wasn't a trick. He let the silence sit, then said, You want me to call somebody? Maria blinked slow. For what? He spared her the word. Then, careful, I know what a broken wrist looks like, even under tape. Not broken, she said, eyes on the coffee level. Sprained. But the syllables came with the brittle lift of staying afloat. Okay. He let it go. He had learned to let people hold their own stories until they offered them up. The spoon tapping at the counter stopped. The clean leather jacket swiveled on his stool, a predator sending interference. He was younger than Ronan had guessed at first glance. Early 30s, maybe. The kind of handsome that curdled fast when it didn't get its way. He raised 2 fingers at Maria like a lazy summons. Refill. She went because people in pain often go. Ronan watched the tiny flinch when the man's hand ghosted her hip as she reached for the cup, the way her lips flattened so thin they almost disappeared. He watched the cook smirk and look away. He watched the manager's camera blink. Ronan ate 1 bite of egg he didn't taste. The blood that had learned to stay cool started to warm. He breathed. He named cars rolling past the window: 04 Tacoma, late model Civic, Silverado with mismatched paint, to keep his hands quiet. He didn't know this town. He'd pulled off the highway because the rain was stitching the world shut and the sign said open all night. But he knew the language of rooms, the way power inhaled and exhaled, and right now the room was holding its breath. The man at the counter, call him Sparrow for the way he cocked his head like a curious bird, for now, let the silence stretch. Then, loud enough for the 2 truckers to hear, he said, "What kind of waitress can't even pour coffee with her right hand?" Useless. The word hit like a coin tossed at a beggar. Heads turned because humiliation is public theater. Maria's cheeks colored. She kept the pot steady. Ronan's jaw flexed once. Sparrow grinned, sipped, left the cup wet with the kind of spit people use to mark territory. "Answer when I talk to you." The busboy looked at the floor. The cook laughed into his griddle. The manager's door stayed shut. Ronan stood because men like Sparrow count on nobody standing. He kept his voice level, lazy like Sunday. "Hey. Let her do her job." Sparrow's eyes slid to him and did the slow survey: beanie, work boots scarred by real work, denim that hung loose enough to hide what needed hiding. He saw fists before faces, most of them do. "Who asked you?" "Nobody," Ronan said. "I'm just asking you to stop talking to her like she's furniture." The distance between them was 20 feet of tile and rules. Sparrow tipped his head again, almost amused. "You stand when you talk to me because you think it makes you tall, old man? Sit down. Eat your, what is that, even real food?" Ronan smiled a little, because the man needed him to be angry. "You tap your spoon 3 times every time you want something. Habit like that gets you identified." For a beat the spoon stayed still. Then Sparrow tapped it once, hard, as if to say, "Identify this." Maria set the pot down like it weighed as much as a decision. "It's fine," she whispered to Ronan without looking at him. "Please." He softened his tone. "I hear you." And he did. Hearing didn't mean obedience. It meant he would choose carefully what weight to lift. Sparrow slid off the stool. He wasn't big. Men accustomed to fear don't need to be. He walked toward Ronan, hands empty but not really. Ronan catalogued rings, belt buckle, the outline under the jacket that might have been a blade sheath, might have been nothing. He took 1 step forward too, spilling the space into an overlap where words matter less. "Town like this," Sparrow said, breath that smelled like mint gum and coffee, "you learn to mind your business." "You a tourist?" "Passing through," Ronan said. "Not blind." Sparrow's smile curled. "Then watch this." He turned his head slightly, a cue thrown over his shoulder toward the kitchen. The cook's laughter cut off. The manager's door opened, just a crack. Ronan felt the room rearrange its furniture around a story rehearsed plenty of times before tonight. Maria moved toward the service station by the pie display, as if walls could wick danger like paper poles bleed. Up close, the swelling at her wrist strained the tape and her fingers were a slow ballet of someone relearning how to hold gravity. She brushed past Ronan and he caught the scent of citrus cleaner and sleep lost to someone else's anger. He had spent months buried in a part of the world polite people pretend doesn't exist, building a legend, getting close to men who wore angel wings like armor. He wasn't wearing the colors now because the work he was doing tonight belonged to another patch, the quiet one that said "I see you." Not the club's business. Not the department's anymore. Just his. Sparrow said something easy to the manager peeking out. "It's handled." The manager nodded, grateful to outsource the ugly parts of his own job. Ronan tilted his head toward the busboy. "Hey, kid. You got a first aid kit?" The boy flinched, then looked at Maria as if for permission. She gave a microscopic nod. He vanished into the mop closet and returned with a plastic box scabbed with tape. Ronan opened it on his table. Tape, gauze, a splint still wrapped in plastic. He kept his voice like a neighbor asking about the weather. "Mind if I?" Maria didn't move for a heartbeat. People who've been hurt learn that accepting help is how you get marked for more. Then she shifted, almost imperceptibly, and placed her right hand on the table between them like a bird that might fly if startled. He worked with care that was almost ceremony. Peel the tape, ease the sleeve back, assess, swelling along the radius, bruising in a thumbprint shape that made his neck heat. "You're not useless," he said under his breath, not to contradict Sparrow but to place a different sentence into the air where her bones might hear it. Her voice hopped a humorless edge. "Good to know. Does it hurt here?" He pressed gentle beside the scaphoid. Her inhale answered. He placed the prefabricated splint, wrapped gauze without letting the tape pull skin. "Not a fix," he said. "But it'll keep you from making it worse until a doctor can." "A doctor costs rent," she said, then flinched because truths like that slip out like slips of the tongue. "Understood." He taped the end. "There are clinics." Sliding scale. He named two he knew from other towns, then stopped because telling people where to go is not the same as getting them there. Sparrow leaned a hip on the opposite side of the table. His expression said he'd tolerated enough kindness for one night. "You playing hero?" Ronan didn't look up from the tape. "I'm wrapping a wrist." Sparrow's hand came down on the table, palm flat. "You're done." He glanced at Maria. "Go clear 4. Now." Ronan moved his coffee cup an inch, giving Sparrow's hand room to either retreat or make a more permanent mistake. Sparrow waited. Ronan didn't raise his gaze until he finished the last wrap and smoothed it flat with the pad of his thumb. Then he looked up and let Sparrow see what lived behind his eyes when he wasn't pretending to be smaller. Some men recognize an animal of their own kind and stop. Sparrow doubled down. "You paying her doctor, hero? You paying her rent? You paying for the plate she drops with that useless hand?" His voice had gathered an audience. He thrived there. Ronan kept his tone conversational. "What I'm paying is attention." He held Sparrow's stare. "That's usually where the bill starts." Sparrow laughed, and it wasn't about humor. "I think you need a lesson in local custom." Ronan's left hand drifted to the edge of the table, not to the knife he didn't carry tonight, but to the fork, which is sometimes enough. He wasn't going to stick anyone. You could move a lot of men with a quiet fork. A siren muttered somewhere far, then died. Rain tapped the window. The kid with the bus tubs stood frozen, a statue built from second-hand fear. The manager's door opened wider this time and a man in a tie, cheap, damp at the knot, stepped out, palms up. "Gentlemen," he said, the way people say it when they mean animals. "We don't need trouble." "You already have it," Ronan said softly, eyes on Sparrow. Sparrow's head cocked. "You think I'm the problem?" Ronan considered the question as if it were sincere. "I think you like to pick up broken things because then you get to decide if they stay broken." Maria stood very still. Her face did a thing he recognized, hope and terror sharing a chair and not looking at each other. Sparrow's jaw flexed. His spoon tapped twice on the edge of the table, habit, anger, a private metronome. He leaned closer. "You don't know who I am." Ronan held the stare the way you hold a skittish horse, quiet hands, steady breath. "Then tell me. Save us both the guesswork." Sparrow smiled without warmth. "I'm the guy who brings friends." He whistled once, 2 notes, a signal that traveled like a command to the night. The front door chimed. 2 men in jackets that matched his stepped in, shook rain from their shoulders, and scanned the room with the loose indifference of people who don't need to be careful because careful is for other people. One wore a beaded bracelet that didn't belong on those hands. The other had the restless bounce of someone who'd tried sobriety and lost. Maria whispered, "Don't." Ronan wasn't sure if she meant don't move or don't leave it alone. He rose anyway because situations draw their own borders and he wasn't built to live on the wrong side of them. He stepped so his body became a line between her and the men. Not dramatic. Not a dare. A fact. The newcomers fanned casually, one near the door, one by the jukebox. Sparrow stayed close, so close that Ronan could see the nick in his left ear where a ring had been torn out long ago, the kind of scar you get when you belong to people who take trophies. "You from around here?" the bracelet one asked, studying Ronan like a strange tool in the wrong toolbox. "Passing through," Ronan repeated. "Because you smell like club," Jukebox said, sniffing the air as if it could tell history. "Old oil and bad decisions." Ronan's laugh showed in only one corner of his mouth. "We all smell like something." He didn't offer names. Names are magic tricks, once given, they belong to the audience. Sparrow drummed his fingers along the table edge. "You trying to protect her?" He tilted his chin toward Maria like she was furniture after all. "She doesn't need protecting. She needs training." Maria's mouth opened, closed. She looked at the door like a swimmer measuring the distance to shore and the riptide between. "Training," Ronan repeated, tasting the word like a slur. He knew training. He'd been trained to ride with men whose mercy was conditional and whose kindness was strategy. He'd been trained to tolerate things that should never be tolerated because the mission mattered. He'd burned that version of himself to ash and rebuilt what he could from the pieces that didn't stink of smoke. He took a half step forward, enough to tilt the math. "New plan," he said, still calm. "You take your friends and leave. She stays. The rest of us eat pie and pretend we don't know how close to stupid tonight came." Jukebox laughed. Or we find out how much of my patience the rain washed away." He wasn't posturing. He wasn't even angry. Anger clouds edges. He felt clear. Sparrow shifted weight, and in the shift Ronan saw it. The bulge under the jacket wasn't a blade. It was a compact pistol in an inside-the-waistband holster with the cheap clip that prints if you don't know how to wear it. Sparrow knew how. He just needed Ronan to know he knew. Ronan tipped his head toward the ceiling, a tiny prayer to people who had taught him to keep rooms from dying. He moved his right hand from the table to his jacket pocket very slowly. "Don't," Sparrow said, voice flattened. Ronan pulled out his wallet and flipped it open to the slot where plastic lived. He slid a worn card free and placed it on the table between them. Not a badge. Not anymore. A card with a crisis hotline on one side and a clinic's intake number on the other, the one he gave to women who needed a door other than the front one. He set it next to the fork like a choice. "For her," he said. Sparrow studied the card as if it might explode. Then he smirked. "She doesn't need your charity. She's got me." Maria made a sound like a breath that tried to be a laugh and failed. "I have a job," she said, as if this were a normal conversation about schedules. "Not for long if you keep dropping plates," the manager muttered, instantly regretting the contribution. Ronan's eyes slid to him, and the manager found somewhere else to be, which happened to be exactly behind his own fear. The bell over the door chimed again. A patrol car's red wash bled through the glass, and a uniform stepped in, shaking rain from the brim of his hat. He had the look of a man who signed up to write tickets and found himself writing reports about bodies. Early 30s, jaw like the edge of a spade. He saw the 3 leather jackets, saw Ronan, saw the way Maria held her wrist, and his shoulders made a decision his mouth hadn't yet. Sparrow's smile relaxed. "Evening, officer," he sang like a man sings when he knows the words will bring him wine. The cop's gaze flicked to the manager, who managed a shrug so neutral it screamed. To Maria, who stared at the floor. To Ronan, who didn't blink. "What's the problem?" the officer asked the room. "Nothing now," Sparrow said. "Just a drifter getting mouthy." Ronan watched how the officer looked at Sparrow, too long, like recognition, the wrong kind. He filed the glance where he kept all the other red flags. The officer walked toward them, boots squeaking. "Sir," he said to Ronan, "I'm going to ask you to step outside with me." Sparrow's friends relaxed. Their shoulders said, "We've rehearsed the scene." Maria swayed an inch, like a woman on a deck that just met a wave. Ronan weighed outcomes. Outside meant no witnesses but the rain and whoever waited in the parking lot. Inside meant a room full of civilians between him and an exit. He needed the math to change. So he did something he hated. He lifted the hem of his shirt just an inch, letting the officer see the truth he kept hidden, the tattooed rocker under the waistband inked in old red, a death's head with angel wings, earned and paid for in miles and memory. The officer's eyes widened by a fraction. Sparrow's smile slipped. Ronan lowered the shirt. He didn't say a word. The officer recalculated. Not an average drifter. Not a man to escort into rain without backup you trust. He cleared his throat. "Let's all take a breath," he said, to the room and to whoever might be listening on a radio. Sparrow's fingers drummed again, faster. "You scared?" he asked Ronan, almost delighted. Ronan looked at Maria. "You okay if I walk out?" he asked her, the only person whose answer mattered. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. Then she nodded, the kind of nod a person gives when they're used to letting storms pass through them because resisting only attracts lightning. "Okay," he said, to her and to himself. He slid the hotline card into her apron pocket while Sparrow watched, a magician who wanted everyone to see the trick. "If you need it." Ronan stepped from the booth, hands visible, heartbeat even. He walked toward the door with the officer at his shoulder and three men's eyes on his back. He felt the weight of the room lean with him. The rain outside sang on sheet metal and trash can lids. The cop pushed the door open. Cold hit like a reset. In the red wash of the patrol car lights, two silhouettes leaned on a primer gray Charger at the edge of the lot. More friends. The hair on Ronan's arms lifted. The officer said quietly, without looking at him, "I don't know what you think you're doing, but don't do it here." Ronan didn't answer. He was thinking about Maria's wrist beneath his fingers, how bones tell the truth even when mouths won't. He was thinking about the habit of tapping a spoon 3 times, and the way habits like that nest inside other habits, like signaling cops and managers and cooks whose complicity paid their mortgages. He was thinking about the phone numbers on that card, and whether a woman who'd learned to make herself small could dial one while a man like Sparrow turned the volume up on his attention. Rain ran from the eaves and ropes. Ronan stepped under it and tilted his face to the cold for one breath, because you never know when you'll get to do that again. Behind him, inside, something shattered. A plate. A plan. Sparrow's voice cut through the door's swing, ugly with triumph. "She doesn't need your help." Maria's voice answered, clearer than it had been all night. "I didn't ask." Ronan took one step toward his bike, then stopped as a low black SUV rolled into the lot with its lights off, floating through rain like a shark fin. It pulled in behind the diner where the camera didn't cover, familiar in a way that made his stomach go tight. He knew that SUV. He knew the dent in the rear bumper, left by a night that had cost 2 men their futures. He knew the driver's silhouette, square, careful, the posture of a man who'd lived a long time making sure other men didn't die without permission. The passenger door opened. A woman stepped out first, hood up, steady despite the rain. She moved with the competence of someone who could pull a man from a burning car without making his pain worse. Ronan blinked. It couldn't be. The driver followed, closing his door with 2 fingers. He lifted his head and the diner light caught his face. Ronan's chest went hollow enough to echo. The man from the SUV looked through the rain straight at Ronan Vale and smiled in recognition, a smile Ronan had last seen the night he walked away from both the badge and the life that came with it. "Agent Vale," the man called, not loud, but the word carried through storm like a thrown knife. "We should talk." The officer at Ronan's shoulder stiffened. Inside, spoons stopped tapping. Maria's hand went unconsciously to her apron pocket where a thin rectangle of cardstock waited like a door. Ronan turned slowly toward the voice he'd hoped to never hear again, rain carving rivers down his beanie and into his collar. The SUV's back door opened as if to invite him in. And from inside the diner, a scream, Maria's, cut the night clean in two. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. 2. Ronan moved before thought could lace its boots. The officer flinched toward his radio, the two by the charger pushed off metal like sprinters. Rain tried to staple everything to the asphalt and failed. The scream had a direction, through the diner, left of the pie display, toward the service corridor. He shouldered the door wide and crossed the threshold into heat and fluorescent hum. The smell of scorched coffee and wet denim met him, along with a skid of ceramic somewhere out of sight. "Maria," he called, not a shout, a locate. The manager stammered, "Back, she," then swallowed his own voice when Sparrow turned on him without looking. The man's head was tilted, listening the way men do who keep maps in their ears. Another sound, a male yelp, cut short. Jukebox and bracelet hesitated, part fight, part curiosity. Sparrow smiled like a magician who knows where the dove is hidden. Ronan slid past them, keeping his shoulders square so no one got a free shot at ribs. The hallway was a narrow throat between the bathrooms and the dry storage closet. At the far end, a door marked employees only hung open like a jaw. A fan blew cold air from the alley, rain reached in with wet fingers. Maria stood in the threshold, the splinted right hand gripping the frame. Her chest sawed the air. Her braid had come loose and strung itself along her collarbone. Between her and the alley lay a man on his side, curled around his own hand, cursing like a prayer. The busboy hovered, eyes huge, mop handle raised like a lance. Ronan understood the picture. Someone had grabbed, Maria had broken a finger with the leverage he'd given her in the rap, a tiny hinge suddenly useful. She was shaking but her eyes were steady. "You okay?" he said. She nodded once, jaw tight. "He tried to take my pocket." Her fingers touched the silhouette of the hotline card beneath the apron, protective. "Said he'd lose it for me." "You didn't let him," Ronan said, satisfaction threading clean through the rain. Sparrow's voice floated from the dining room, theatrical. "You think paper saves you, girl? Paper is just paper." Ronan stepped between Maria and the hallway's mouth as Sparrow and his two ornaments entered, arranging themselves with the geometry of practiced intimidation. The officer stopped at the corridor's head, hand near his holster but not on it, gaze flicking to the alley and back. Rain pounded the metal back door like another cop knocking. "On your feet," Sparrow told the groaning man. The guy scrambled, more offended than injured, and limped behind his friends. Sparrow's eyes found the splint. "Cute," he said to Maria. "You let him touch you?" She lifted her chin. He asked. The three syllables were small knives, thrown without a tremor. Sparrow smiled, but some thread in his weave frayed. "Ask me next time," he said, like a joke. "No," Ronan said, tired of bartering grammar with men who rename harm as romance. He shifted, one step, enough to tilt gravity. "This ends in the rain with words, or it ends on the tile with teeth. Choose." "Agent Vale," said the voice behind him, silk over wire. The driver of the black SUV had entered as if the building were a set he'd rented. He filled the hall without raising his shoulders, his presence a permission slip nobody had signed. The woman at his side, hood back now, took the opposite wall with the efficiency of a medic or a killer, and Ronan couldn't immediately decide which she was tonight. "Not an agent anymore," Ronan said, each word placed like a chess piece. The man, Calloway, that was his name in the world he'd left, moved his gaze past Ronan to Sparrow as if they, not Ronan, were the ones scheduled for discussion. "Do we have a problem?" Calloway asked, mild as asking about weather on a porch. Sparrow flicked his eyes over him and felt money. He straightened an inch. "Depends who's asking." Calloway didn't smile. He had a face built to be believed by juries. "Someone who dislikes inefficiency. This establishment is not worth the attention of 4 patrol units, 2 ambulances, and my team on a rainy night. What it is worth is a signed cooperation agreement and a closed loop." The officer at the head of the hall stiffened. Sir? Relax, Weller, Calloway said without looking. You're doing fine at exactly what you were told to do, which is delay. Then, to Ronan, you still find gravity where other men float. Ronan kept his hands low, open. You following me? Calloway's eyes flicked to the splint on Maria's wrist. We're following him, he said, tipping his chin at Sparrow. And the people who follow him. Your presence is a variable I didn't account for, but not an unwelcome one. Sparrow bristled. You think you can talk around me? Calloway ignored him. I need you, Vale, he said simply. The rain punctuated the door with patient fingers. The medic woman beside him scanned the room, Maria, the busboy, Sparrow's too, the cop, calculating supply and demand if blood became currency. Ronan kept his voice level. I needed you once, he said. You sent me into a house with the lights off and a dog that didn't bark. You lived, Calloway said. And we burned 5 ghosts from that address. He didn't say it like pride. He said it like a ledger. Stop, Maria said suddenly, like someone deciding she'd had enough of men trading languages over her life. She held the back door frame as if it could be a partner. I'm going home. Sparrow laughed. You are home, he said, the word a leash. Maria looked at Ronan, not asking permission, and stepped into the alley rain. The air hit her like a baptism. The busboy moved to follow out of habit or loyalty. She shook her head, and he froze, the mop handle still half-raised. Ronan's whole body tracked Sparrow's next breath. The man did not like being ignored. His hand went inside his jacket. Don't, the officer said, louder than his badge would usually allow, a plea and a command braided together. Sparrow's palm came out empty, but the movement had been mostly about muscle memory. He tilted his head, tossed his spoon into the air, caught it by the bowl, a coin trick. You going to stop me, hero? Ronan didn't answer. He stepped backward into the rain, putting himself between Maria and the hall's mouth. His boots hit a slick of oil and his heel corrected without thought. The alley stretched to the street like a throat. The Charger at the lot edge idled, its driver watching through wipe arcs. Calloway and the medic followed into the wet. The cop hung back, torn between orders and the version of himself he met in the mirror before he pinned his name on. Vale, Calloway said, almost conversational under the storm. The case didn't end when you quit. The players learn a new game. He nodded, subtle, towards Sparrow and the men orbiting him. He's laundering bodies through businesses exactly like this, cash places with high turnover and managers who need protection more than they need morality. The waitress's wrist? Collateral. The boy with the mop? Recruitment. The owner? Debt. The cop? Compromise. You know the choreography. I needed interrupted. Ronan's throat tasted like the old world, ash and aluminum. You don't need me. You've got a warrant and 6 unmarked cars. Calloway's smile was a straight line. We have no warrant. We have paperwork that wants to be a warrant and a judge who prefers campaign donations to justice. What we do have is a window. And you. Also, one loud variable. He lifted his chin toward the diner where Sparrow had stepped fully into the rain, arms spread, prosecutor summoning jury. That is about to make the kind of mistake we can build a life on. Sparrow clapped once. If this is theater, he said, to the parking lot more than to the people in front of him, I'm bored. Get in the car, Maria. Now. She shook her head without the tremor she'd had inside. I'm not your car. Sparrow's laugh came out thin. He took one step off the concrete lip of the back doorway. You're cute when you try to be clever. Don't make me come explain things in front of your new fan club. Ronan glanced sideways at Maria. Rain had pasted hair to her temple. Her mouth was a line that wouldn't bend. The splint looked too white in all this gray. She leaned forward slightly, the stance of someone who has chosen and is waiting to see whether the world will accept the choice. Stay behind me, Ronan said, out of habit and sincerity. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. They moved together toward the lot where lines between light and shadow had more to do with decisions than with bulbs. Jukebox and Bracelet peeled toward the Charger, angling to flank. The officer stepped into the rain finally, taking the long way around as if hoping to arrive as a mediator instead of a man who had to arrest someone he might eat with tomorrow. Calloway stayed near the back door, unworried about mud on expensive shoes, watching as if his eyes wrote affidavits other people would sign later. The medic ghosted wide, hand near the inside pocket where gauze and tourniquets live. "Keys," Sparrow said to the driver of the Charger. The driver tossed them. Sparrow snatched them with the confidence of someone who believes physics is a rumor. "This your kingdom?" Ronan asked him. Sparrow grinned. "Tonight it is." He clicked the Charger open and held the door like a challenge. "Get in," he told Maria. "Or I put your friend through the glass and you watch." The rain flattened into a steady sheet, no more drama left in it. Ronan felt time slow down the way it does before a crash. His body remembered where everyone was without looking. He exhaled. He took one step left. "Knife!" Bracelet shouted, and the world ambient shrank to edges. Ronan had no blade. He had the fork from the table still in his jacket pocket because he wouldn't put it down where Sparrow could use it as a boast. He pulled it and held it low, a ridiculous little object made wholly by intention. Sparrow laughed too loud. "You going to eat me?" "Only if you're undercooked," Ronan said, and moved. The fork raked Sparrow's wrist as the other man reached for Maria's elbow, a small pain, a big message. Sparrow hissed and swung a short hook that would have taken an average man's head off. Ronan ducked inside it, his shoulder landing under Sparrow's ribs, his hand finding the cheap clip of the pistol and wrenching. Metal squawked against denim. The gun came free and kissed the puddle. Bracelet lunged, Ronan pivoted, let the man's momentum carry him past, tripped him so that the curb completed the insult. Jukebox came in low, Ronan stepped, the way a door swings open for the wind, and Jukebox's knee found Ronan's thigh and slid. The officer shouted something nobody had time to parse. The manager watched from the window with a towel in his hands like a flag ready to become white. Sparrow scrambled for the pistol with a curse and a grin that meant he still believed in math. Ronan's boot arrived first, placed gently but decisively on Sparrow's knuckles. There was a sound like a walnut deciding to be halves. Sparrow howled, pulling his hand back. "Enough!" Calloway's voice cut through the rain like a blade honed on years of courtroom doors that refused to open. "Everyone stand still." Nobody did. The Charger's engine revved as if impatient. The patrol car's radio crackled with a voice that had nothing to do with this block but needed to be heard by somebody somewhere. Maria moved. She didn't run. She stepped around Ronan and put her splinted hand on Sparrow's shoulder, not gentle, pushing him backward just enough that he felt the edge of his own open car door against his calves. Her eyes were very dark. "You don't own me," she said, and the sentence changed the temperature of everyone's breath. Sparrow spat water and something else. "I own your debt." "Then collect it without touching me," she said. "Or it's not debt." He blinked, off script. The medic's voice drifted in, respectful and neutral. "Sir? Your fingers look compromised." Sparrow snarled. "Keep her out of my mouth." Ronan had the pistol now, the safety checked by habit he hated to recognize as still living in his bones. He didn't point it at anyone. He held it like a promise he'd rather not keep. The officer had his hands up in a gesture that said he'd surrendered any hope of controlling the scene 5 minutes ago and was now auditioning for witness. Calloway stepped forward a single pace. "This is where it stops looking like extortion and starts looking like kidnapping," he told Sparrow. "One of those is a misdemeanor in this county if you pay the right people. The other is federal. I recommend we all go inside, call a medic, and sign a stack of forms that ensures none of us sleep this week." Sparrow's eyes darted. He didn't like paperwork. He liked rooms that understood him without subtitles. He flicked a glance at Bracelet, who had regained both feet and dignity, and at Jukebox, who had found a length of tire iron from somewhere indecent. The calculation ran behind his eyes and came up wrong. He looked at Ronan, at the pistol, at the woman who had not moved her hand from his shoulder as if reminding his body where it had no permission to be. He smiled. It was the smile a child uses before he knocks a glass off the table to see if gravity is still working. He slammed his hip into the open charger door and rolled backward into the driver's seat. The key fob clicked, the engine stepped up from idle to intention. "Don't," Ronan said, "because sometimes the word finds the ears it needs." But Sparrow had never been good at receiving grammar unless he wrote it. He dropped the shifter, stomped the accelerator, and the Charger's rear tires chewed rain into smoke. Jukebox dove through the passenger door with the tire iron like a rodeo athlete. Bracelet yanked the rear door and flung himself in. The car fishtailed, hopped the parking lot lip, and then stalled. The engine coughed like a man who lied about his lungs. The Charger shuddered, gagged, died. A thin ribbon of steam curled from the hood, innocent as breath. Ronan blinked. The officer's laugh escaped his mouth before he could catch it. Sparrow pounded the wheel. The medic made a small approving sound that could have been mistaken for pity. Calloway turned his head to Maria. "You?" Her mouth quirked, just barely. "Busboy keeps a sugar shaker with the pie plates," she said. "Salt looks the same in this light." She lifted her chin toward the alley. "Spilled a lot when I bumped the table earlier." Ronan felt the clean and righteous joy reserved for people who watch the powerless build a lever. He wanted to hug her and to step back so she could do whatever she needed without an audience. He did neither, but his face did a thing he hadn't felt in months. Sparrow flung his door open again, came out red with effort and rain. "You think that's funny?" he shouted at Maria, stepping toward her with a fist he could still make. The officer moved, Ronan moved faster. He didn't hit Sparrow. He spoke, over the fist, past the bones. "Walk," he said, not to Sparrow, to Maria. "Now." "To the SUV." She looked at him. He saw the instant the suggestion became her idea. She stepped away without hurry, the posture of someone who had decided that her feet are not polite when roads are rude. Sparrow lunged. Ronan caught the wrist, turned it, let the man feel his own leverage betray him. "We're done," he said in Sparrow's ear, a private sentence in a public rain. "You're going to sit on the curb and think about all the ways this could have gone worse for you. Then you're going to stand up when the ambulance arrives and let them tape your fingers. Then you're going to go home and figure out whether you prefer debt you can pay or enemies you can't kill." Sparrow jerked free, almost. Ronan's other hand picked his balance like a lock. They ended in something that looked like a dance if you squinted, and ended on the curb anyway. Sparrow swore and made a promise with his eyes people usually have to write in blood. Ronan let it be letters instead. Inside the diner, faces were at the glass, the way people in a storm press to the window to see whether lightning is learning new tricks. The manager had his phone to his ear. The busboy stood in the alley's mouth with his mop like a standard and the expression of someone seeing a road appear where a wall had always been. Maria reached the SUV. The medic opened the back door with a hand that said "Trust me," and for reasons Ronan couldn't articulate yet, he did. The medic helped Maria up and in with the efficiency of practiced care. The interior light caught the splint, the tape had held. Good tape, good rap, a small perfect thing inside an ugly night. Calloway spoke beside Ronan's shoulder. "You always were best when improvisation met principle." "I'm not back," Ronan said, meaning within whatever enterprise used to send him into rooms with broken furniture and expensive men. "You never left," Calloway said, and for once it didn't sound like a manipulation. It sounded like a diagnosis of the muscle below the one that pumps blood. Sirens approached for real this time, not whispers. The red and blue reflection painted the puddles with festival colors no one wanted. Sparrow's friends began the slow choreography of men who need to look innocent quickly and have forgotten how. The officer, Weller, stood with his hands away from weapons, a posture taught in a seminar about de-escalation and deployed tonight like a prayer. "Here's how this goes," Calloway said in the calm tone of a man who sells contracts that taste like water. "Ambulance checks hands and wrists. Everyone signs a statement that begins with "I didn't see much" and ends with "and then I went home." The manager will be very sorry his cameras were unplugged by a power surge during the storm. The cop will remember that his kid's private school needs next month's tuition and decide to file his report in a way that doesn't get him called a hero. I will take statements from the waitress and the boy, and I will ask them the kinds of questions that open doors instead of locking them. He looked at Ronan. We'll get on that bike and follow us, because if you don't, the next time she hears a spoon it'll be at a different counter with a different uniform, and neither of us will be nearby to translate. Ronan hated that the logic held. He also hated that Calloway had said us, which implied teams and tactics and the lodestone of old loyalties pulling iron filings around his heart. Maria leaned forward from the SUV's back seat. Her mouth shaped a question he could read without hearing. You coming? He was. He would. The decision felt less like surrender than like a hand on a rail in a stairwell with smoke. He nodded once. The medics did their work. Tape on Sparrow's fingers, questions asked and answered with various flavors of lie. They offered a sling to Maria, she shook her head and kept the splint like armor. The officer found paperwork to chew. The manager remembered his insurance policy. The rain slackened to a mist that looked like glow when the streetlight found it. Calloway gave a small nod, let's move, and the SUV eased from the lot. Ronan swung onto the bike and let the engine fill the space left by adrenaline, like a good song after an argument. He fell in behind their taillights and tasted the old ache that sounded like promise when you were young and like prophecy when you weren't. They drove 10 minutes through a grid of streets that had stopped practicing beauty years ago and settled for function. They turned into a lot behind a community health clinic with a mural of hands painted in a ring around a tree. The building smelled like bleach and hope rubbed thin. The medic led Maria inside with a competence that brokered consent instead of demanding it. Calloway held the door as if it opened to a future he'd like to take credit for later. In the triage room, a nurse with braids as neat as folded sheets assessed the wrist, touched gently, nodded approvingly at the wrap, and ordered an X-ray. You do nice work, she told Ronan without looking away from her patient. He shrugged. I watched people who knew how not to hurt. Maria laughed a little, then winced because laughing tugs tendons. He also knows how to hurt if he has to. Her eyes went sideways to him, not afraid of that truth. Dual certification, Ronan said. The nurse left to call radiology. Calloway stood with his back to the closed door, arms folded, saying nothing for once. The medic set a bottle of water in front of Maria. Sip, she said. The voice carried years of field nights. What's your name? Maria asked her. Lena, the medic said. I break bad nights into smaller pieces. Maria nodded as if she'd been given a reason to keep sitting upright. Maria. She extended the left hand. Lena shook it with respect. Calloway finally spoke, to Maria. We can protect you if you help us. It was the kind of sentence that wears a suit. Maria took a breath that tasted like disinfectant. Protect me how long? She asked. Tonight? This week? Until the next guy with a charger and a sad mouth shows up at my other job? Calloway did not flinch at the accuracy. Long enough to rewire the neighborhood, he said. And long enough to get you somewhere that isn't this zip code. How long is that? She repeated, not buying futures. Depends on how brave you want to be, he said. She looked at Ronan then, and he understood that the answer to Calloway's arithmetic would not be written in numbers but in whether the man standing in the corner with his hands in his pockets was about to choose old loyalties or new vows. I'm tired of brave, she said slowly. I want quiet. Then we make it loud first, Ronan said, because that's how quiet gets built in places where men like Sparrow teach the rules. Her eyes held his, a steady look that measured weight. If I say yes, does he go away? She meant Sparrow. She also meant the pattern he stood for. Ronan wanted to promise. He had lied to too many people in the service of causes and could not stomach the taste anymore. He goes somewhere, he said. Jail if we're lucky. Elsewhere if we're not. But he stops tapping his spoon at you. I can promise that part. Calloway watched them like a man at the edge of a negotiation who knows the clause that closes the deal is kindness, not law. Mireya sipped water. "I owe money," she said. "Not to him, to the people he works for. They like to say they're not a gang. They have a logo on a hoodie. They lend cash at midnight. The kind of math where you never get to zero." "Numbers?" Calloway asked, pencil already poised in his mind. 3,000, she said. Her mouth twisted. "It started at 900. Lena hissed softly through her teeth. "Teeth like that don't let go." Ronan's jaw tightened. "We break the jaw," he muttered. Calloway nodded as if he'd just been given an address. "We can unwind 3,000, he said. "We can unwind 30. What we need is the ledger that explains who holds which pen." He leaned forward a fraction. "Names, accounts, order of operations. How does the cash move from the back table in a diner to the men whose suits don't wrinkle?" Mireya looked at the wall where a poster described signs of stroke. "I don't know the suits," she said. "I know the street. I know who picks up, who pretends to be the manager, who brings flowers to make the apology look like love." "It's enough," Calloway said. "And there's one more thing we need." Ronan shot him a glance. He knew that tone. It meant we were about to climb a staircase with rotten steps. Calloway met his look. "I need you to walk back into that diner at opening tomorrow and sit in the same booth. I need you to let the room see you again. I need rumors." Ronan let the idea rest in his hands like a weight. "You're going to flash me in the paper like bait. I'm going to let a very specific photo accidentally post to a neighborhood Facebook group where a woman named Brenda believes she is the mayor," Calloway said. Lena snorted. "It will show an X-something agent speaking to a waitress and a busboy at a clinic whose grant I happen to manage. It will have a caption about heroes and rain. The men we want will read it as threat and opportunity at the same time, which means they'll come close. When they do, I want you talking to them in a language I don't speak." "Angel," Ronan said flatly, meaning the patch Calloway had already invoked with the old greeting. Calloway nodded. "Or the idea of one. The scent is enough." Mireya shook her head, a tiny bewildered smile poking through the shock. "This is insane," she said. "This is Tuesday," Lena said, and handed her another water. They sat with the thunder of distant weather for a while. The X-ray tech came, took images, returned with films that glowed like ghosts. "Non-displaced fracture," the nurse said, pleased to give a truth with a plan attached. "We can immobilize you here. Orthopedics in 2 days. Keep it dry. Keep it above your heart." "Already there," Mireya said, and placed her splinted hand over her chest as if to underline the joke. Calloway gave her a ride packet with numbers to call that weren't printed on a single flimsy card. He spoke gently of witness protection without saying the phrase and of motel rooms without carpets that remember screams. He spoke of how to keep her phone off, and how to not tell even the good people where she'd be for 72 hours. Ronan stood by the window and watched rain pretend to stop. He thought about the cost of pulling a woman out of a current when the river had so many mouths. He thought about men like Sparrow multiplying in towns like this the way algae multiplies in warm water nobody circulates. "Hey," Mireya said from the chair. He turned. She lifted the corner of her mouth. "You look like you're trying to pick up a piano." "Just the bench," he said. "You okay?" He considered lying. The truth sat on his tongue like a coin. "I'm better when my hands are busy," he said. "Good," she said. "Tomorrow your hands can hold coffee and pretend we didn't almost drown tonight." She glanced at Calloway. "If I do this, you keep him from being stupid?" "I can keep him from being as stupid as he wants to be," Calloway said, which was closer to honest than most men in suits get. Lena leaned against the door and studied Ronan. "You got anybody who worries when you don't come home?" Ronan sifted memory for faces he could still call. "Found 2, both ghosts." "I've got a bike with a personality," he said. "That counts," Lena said, and opened the door for the nurse who came back with a fresh cast kit. They wrapped Maria's wrist in the soft undersleeve and the hard shell, blue as sky no one had seen tonight, and wrote her name across it with a marker so that when she looked down she saw herself spelled correctly by a hand that didn't want anything from her. They left the clinic through the back. The SUV's tires whispered over wet pavement. Ronan followed, the bike reporting its health through the grips. They didn't go to a safe house. They went to a safe hour, the kind between 1 and 3 when men like Sparrow finally remember they are mammals and sleep like prisoners. The motel had doors that opened directly to weather and a clerk with a crossword and the look of someone who had seen everything and learned which parts to forget. Calloway took 2 rooms, side by side. He gave one key to Maria and the other to Lena, and then handed a third to Ronan. "If you don't like sleeping alone with your thoughts," he said without irony, "Lena keeps the TV on low with nature shows." Ronan eyed the woman who could have sutured him with her eyes closed. She shrugged. "Penguins are excellent at crisis intervention." Maria looked at the key in her palm as if it might decide her life without permission. "I've got a shift at 9 if I want to keep it," she said. "You want to keep it?" Ronan asked. She considered the question seriously. "I want to keep my choices," she said finally. Calloway put a number in her phone that would ring only for her. 9 a.m., he said. "Sit him in the same booth, pour coffee with your left, and nod when the pie is good. We'll be across the street in a plumber's van that smells like what it says on the sides. If anyone asks, you tell them your hero stayed up all night guarding your door, and you roll your eyes when you say hero so it sounds like a joke." She laughed, truly this time, surprised by her own mouth. "I can do that." Ronan stood in the doorway until she closed the chain. He listened to the click. The sound should not have been enough. Tonight it was. Sleep came like a thief who had the wrong address. He let it steal what it could. Morning was a pitcher of cold light. The rain had wrung itself out and left the air with a hangover. Ronan washed his face in motel soap and watched the mirror not quite returning his expression. He put the beanie back on like a flag that didn't mean what it meant last night and walked across the parking lot to the diner, the bike idling like a dog who knows it doesn't have to come inside if it doesn't want to. The bell chimed. The same coffee. The eggs would be the same if eggs had memory. The busboy saw him and flushed a color teenagers invent in new light. The manager found a drawer to inspect. The cook had been traded for another man with a hairnet and a careful distance from any conversation. Maria stepped from the kitchen like a woman who had walked through a storm and remembered which parts of herself to dry first. The cast was a flag now, blue and named. She carried a coffee pot in her left hand with the ease of someone who'd practiced in mirrors. She reached his booth, met his eyes for one beat, morning, and poured. "We're out of cherry," she said in his ear like a secret. "But the apple's honest." "Honest is enough," he said. He sat where he had sat, back to the wall, view of the door, the alley, the counter. He watched the room breathe. He counted heads. He listened for spoons. They came in like delivery men, 2 at first with clipboard energy and boots that had seen real mud, then another in a polo with a logo that meant something to someone in a different neighborhood. They ordered pie and coffee without looking at the menu. They smiled too much. They looked at Maria the way men who collect debts look at a ledger that started writing back. Across the street, a white van with a cartoon wrench on the side parked slightly crooked. A man in a ball cap sat behind the wheel and read the paper upside down. Another man climbed into the back with a coil of hose that didn't kink. The plumber's number on the side had 1 digit wrong. Maria moved table to table with the rhythm of someone who had decided to dance even if the band didn't know the song. She made eye contact when she poured. She did not apologize when cups were full. She laughed when the busboy told a joke that wasn't funny and made it funny by survival. The men with clipboards waited until the place had filled with the safe noise of forks. Then Polo stood, stretched like a cat who wore cologne, and wandered to Ronan's booth. "You the welcome wagon?" he asked, pleasant. "Depends who's moving in," Ronan said. Polo glanced at Maria's cast. "She's clumsy," he said. "Breaks things." "Sad." "Careful," Ronan said. "She fixes them too." Polo clicked his tongue. She belonged to a circle of friends, he said, as if talking to a child about a playground. Sometimes circles roll. They roll over people who put their feet in the wrong place. Ronan stirred his coffee the way men who don't have spoons stir, by lifting the cup and rotating the wrist. I like geometry, he said. I prefer lines. Polo smiled. You smell like bikes. Ronan smiled back. You smell like borrowed money. Polo's eyes cooled. We should chat. We are. Outside. Ronan stood slowly. On the way, he said to Maria without moving his mouth, 2 minutes. If I'm not back, spill the sugar again. She didn't turn her head. Her mouth tilted. We're out of sugar, she said out loud, and the busboy snorted into his sleeve. Outside, the light made the puddles honest. Polo led him to the alley, not the lot. The Charger was gone. In its place, a box truck with a florist's logo. He opened the side door and let Ronan see buckets of carnations and chrysanthemums, the lids of 2 crates that didn't say what they held. We bring apologies, Polo said mildly. We also bring reminders. He gestured toward the crates. She signs, or we deliver. Ronan looked, not at the crates, but at the sticker on their corners, a shipping label to a distribution center 3 counties away that Calloway had once described as a laundromat for anything that needed a new name. You want her signature, Ronan said. On what? An agreement, Polo said. She drops the police nonsense. She acknowledges last night was a lover's quarrel. She agrees to pay a reasonable fee for our inconvenience. We forgive the salt. And if she doesn't? Polo's smile rewrote the word reasonable. You seem like a man who's seen a lot of tragedies start small. Ronan stepped closer and let Polo see what the night had left in him. You're the middle, he said. You think that makes you safe because you're not the street and you're not the office. Middles drown first. Polo's throat moved, just a little. You threatening me? I'm reminding you that thunder follows lightning, Ronan said. Lightning, Polo mused. That would be, those men across the street in the van with the wrong phone number? Ronan did not look. That would be anyone who mistakes kindness for weakness. Polo considered. We could take her in daylight, he said, idly. We could take the kid. We could. Try, Ronan said. And count how many people you bring home. He took another half step, not crowding, but making the air think. You know what patch I wore. Polo's eyes flicked to Ronan's waist as if tattoos could speak through cloth. Retired, he said. Retired doesn't mean empty, Ronan said. It means full of ghosts who still show up for roll call. Polo laughed, because fear needs a sound sometimes. Okay, cowboy. We do this your way. She has until midnight to come to the warehouse on Juniper. No cops. She brings the amount. We shake hands. We forget last night. He held out a card that had only an address and a flower. Ronan didn't take it. You're going to want to be out of that warehouse by 11, he said quietly. And you're going to want to tell your friends to leave their spoons at home. Polo tilted his head. Because? Because thunder, Ronan said, and walked back into the diner before Polo could choose a synonym for bluff. Maria met his eyes as he slid into the booth. He placed nothing on the table. She put a fresh cup of coffee down like a signal flag and said to the room at large, lunch rush is early today. Across the street, Brenda's Facebook post was already blooming among people who believed that the best protection against evil was sharing a photo of a sunset and typing blessed. The white van's door slid shut. Calloway lifted his phone. He didn't smile. He never did when he was about to do something right for the wrong reasons. They stayed until noon. They stayed until 2. Sparrow didn't come. Polo did, twice, to check the room's humidity and to let Ronan see that he had no fear of the light. The officer from last night came in for late breakfast, ordered oatmeal like a penance, and sat at the counter where he could see both the alley and the exit. The busboy learned how to clear plates with one hand so he could keep the other free without thinking about why. At 5, Ronan stood, put enough cash into the saucer to pay for half the bar, and said to Maria, "We'll take a drive." "Where?" she asked, even though the address on the back of the florist's card had already written itself across the part of her mind that kept lists. "Juniper," he said. "You bringing flowers?" "Thunder," he said. Calloway met them in the alley. Lena checked the cast again as if it were wholly and vulnerably ordinary. The white van had a cousin now, a boxy sedan with a spare tire where a badge might be. Calloway handed Ronan a small recorder, smaller than a thumb. "For the poetry," he said. "Not admissible. Inspirational." Maria tucked the florist's card into her apron pocket the way she had tucked the hotline card last night. She squared her shoulders. "If I go in," she said, "I talk." "You don't talk for me." Ronan nodded. "You write your own grammar." She breathed. "Okay." The warehouse on Juniper looked like every warehouse on every Juniper in 1,000 towns, corrugated metal scabbed with old paint, a chain-link fence that sagged under the weight of 10,000 cigarettes, a keypad that beeped like it wanted attention. A man with a clipboard stood outside pretending he didn't type the code between blinks. The sky threatened rain and decided to wait because drama doesn't play double features. Inside, the air was colder than outside. Concrete and echoes. Pallets. The florist's truck backed to a loading dock like an alibi trying too hard. Men in vests that said security without identifying who was being secured wandered with the aimlessness of sharks in an aquarium. Polo waited with a smile and a folder. "Miss Maria," he said, offering a chair that looked surprisingly comfortable. "May I call you that?" "No," she said, and sat. He placed the folder on the table. "This is the agreement." She did not touch it. "This is the IOU your soul," she said, and her voice did not tremble. He laughed. "We're not devils." "Devils don't do paperwork," she said. "You do." Ronan stood just behind her right shoulder where her peripheral vision could find him without needing to turn. Calloway was not visible. The plumber's van had melted into the alley that ran behind the warehouse, and inside it men with wires in their ears listened to a symphony of forklift beeps and practical criminality. "Midnight," Polo said. "You made it early." "I like punctuality." "Early is safer," she said. "People haven't started drinking yet." He nodded as if they shared a craft. "Where do I sign?" she asked, and both men blinked because they had expected more theater. "Here," Polo said, feeding the page toward her. She reached into her apron. He leaned forward, eager for cash. She pulled out a pen instead, blue ink, the kind nurses carry. She clicked it once, a small loud sound in the concrete echo. "Read it first," Ronan murmured. She skimmed. She had been reading debts since she was 13. "I agree I owe," she read aloud. "I agree I'm sorry. I agree no cops. I agree I come when called." She lifted her eyes. "How many times?" Polo's smile said infinite. His mouth said, "Until 0." She set the pen down. "Then I don't sign," she said. Polo's smile thinned. "That wasn't on the menu." "It is now," she said. "You hungry?" He sighed, disappointed in how messy humans make clean transactions. "Miss Maria," Ronan said, reminding him of the pronunciation of the only word that mattered in this room. Polo leaned back. "If you don't sign, the men who pay me ask me why. I tell them a story. They like stories to end tidy. We send someone to clean up your—" "Stop," Ronan said. He lifted the recorder in his hand and placed it on the table, visible. "Do us both the courtesy of finishing that sentence honestly or not at all." Polo looked at the recorder and realized the poetry he'd been promised was not the kind that wins awards. He adjusted tack. "Okay. We're practical. This is leverage. You give us something, we consider forgiving the rest." "What something?" Ronan asked. "His name," Polo said, chin flicking, and the concrete shifted under the weight of the pronoun. The one who called her, he didn't finish, because even devils with paperwork sometimes know which words stain. The spoon. Ronan's mouth went flat. Sparrow. Polo's eyelids gave a tiny twitch. He hadn't expected the name to be in the room already, like seeing a shadow before it knows it's yours. We never called him that. You call everyone something, Ronan said. Names for birds tend to be reserved for men who want to fly, Polo said. I don't think he's a bird. What is he? Maria asked. Her voice was calm, her breathing not. Her splinted hand lay on the table, blue shell catching the fluorescent. Polo folded his hands. He's a man who will be a problem for all of us unless someone decides he's not. And who decides? She asked. Polo smiled as if revealing a magic trick. People like your friend, he said, with a nod at Ronan. People who smell like clubs and have ghosts that answer roll call. Ronan didn't even blink at the echo. If I give you Sparrow, you wipe her debt, he said flatly, so the recorder could hear the barter. Polo considered the arithmetic as if moving beads on a string. We wipe this account, he said carefully. We forget the diner. We forget the salt. And the busboy, Maria said. Polo nodded. And the busboy. Ronan kept his face neutral while something that tasted like acid moved behind his teeth. And you don't touch the manager, he added. Polo shrugged, magnanimous with other people's bodies. Fine. He was never useful. Ronan stared at the flowers in the truck and thought about apologies made of petals. He thought about how men like Polo never touched anything that could stain unless it was inside a vase. Okay, he said finally. I give you Sparrow. You stay off Juniper, off the diner, off their lives. Polo extended a hand. Deal. Ronan didn't take it. I'll bring him to your door, he said. Alive. Tonight. You look at his face and say the word 0. Then you leave. Polo laughed, delighted. You think you can deliver him? Ronan's mouth barely moved. I know where birds go when it rains. Maria stood. Then we're done here until you hear his spoon, she said, and walked toward the door with the posture of a woman leaving a church she had stopped believing in. Outside, the air had decided to be a wall of water again. Lena opened the van's door with 2 fingers. Calloway's face from the driver's seat gave nothing and everything away. You're really going to do this, he said to Ronan, a statement and an incredulity. Ronan rolled his shoulders and let the rain find the old scars. You wanted rumors, he said. I'll give you spectacle. How? Lena asked, genuinely cur. Ronan looked toward the east, where the freeway wore a necklace of red lights. He thought about the places Sparrow would feel safe, dry garages with 2 exits, kitchens where cooks owed favors, a cousin's sofa with a loaded pistol under the cushion. He thought about one place in particular, where a man like Sparrow would hide if he wanted to feel like a god with a key. The storage units by the river, Maria said quietly, as if reading the map in his head. He keeps a spare mouth there. A car, some clothes. He brags into his phone in the alley when he thinks the rain is louder than him. Ronan nodded once. Thunder, he said. They split like cells dividing with purpose. Calloway took the van. Lena slid behind the wheel of the sedan that didn't want to be a cop car and drove like a sermon. Maria climbed into the passenger seat without asking whether she was invited and buckled herself in like dignity wears a belt. Ronan took the bike and let the engine shout down anything that wasn't useful. By the time they rolled up on the storage facility, the rain had calmed into a tick against metal. The units were arranged in long teal rows, each door a mouth that could eat secrets. Security cameras blinked red as if embarrassed to be so obviously pretending. They didn't need to guess the row. They followed the music. Sparrow had never learned to be quiet when victory felt near. His voice carried through the thin tin. Got it handled, he was saying to a phone. Bird in hand. He laughed at his own joke because nobody else did. Ronan lifted his hand. 3 fingers. The old hand signal from another life that meant now, but softly. He didn't kick the door. He knocked. 3 times. Inside, the laugh stopped. "Who's that?" Sparrow called. "Room service," Ronan said, and then, because habit, "Coffee." Silence. Then the rattle of the latch, the roll of metal, and Sparrow's face in the crack, bruised by last night and determined to make a religion out of being right. He saw Ronan. He began to speak. He didn't finish. The door rolled up the rest of the way on a unit stacked with boxes labeled with other men's names and a television tuned to a channel where a preacher shouted about repentance. Ronan stepped inside like a man entering a church. He didn't reach for Sparrow. He reached for a string on the ceiling and pulled. The naked bulb came on. Light made Sparrow small. "Drive," Ronan said over his shoulder, and Calloway and Lena were already moving, the van angling to block the only exit, the sedan sneaking into the space a plan would later measure with chalk. Sparrow lifted his hands. "You think you can?" "Yes," Ronan said, and took one step closer until the rain behind him turned into a curtain and there was only this room, this bird, this knife made of choices. It didn't take long. Men like Sparrow have a beginning and an end, and most of the middle is noise. He swung. Ronan did what he'd been taught before he knew enough to hate the teacher. He avoided, redirected, explained the floor. Sparrow learned about metal ribs. He was breathing hard when he said, "You don't get to." Ronan said, "I do," and put a zip tie on a wrist that had tapped a lot of spoons. They walked him out into the wet. Polo was waiting at the gate, clipboard nowhere now, smile bright as a blade. "Delivery," he sang. Ronan met his eyes. "0, he reminded. Polo's smile didn't dip. "0, he agreed, and for once the word meant exactly itself. Sparrow spit at Ronan's boots and missed. He turned his head toward Maria, who stood a half-car length away with her good hand in her pocket and her shoulders back. He opened his mouth to say the one thing he had left that could still sting, her old name for him that used to mean safety and meant ownership, but she spoke first. "Don't," she said simply. "You wasted your last word." He closed his mouth. The sound the zip tie made against the van's bumper was the smallest sound on the block and the most important. Calloway exhaled so quietly it barely qualified as breath. "You just bent the arc," he said. Ronan shook his head. "She did," he said, and didn't look away from Maria. Polo gestured to the clipboard he had not brought. "We're square," he said. "You have my word." "No," Ronan said. "We have your fear." Polo's mouth did something no paperwork could prevent. He nodded once. "Fair." They let the van's door shut on Sparrow like a period. Juniper exhaled. Somewhere a dog barked at a thunder it would never see. The storage facility's cameras blinked and forgot. They did not celebrate. They drove, slow, careful, past the diner where the busboy was showing the morning girl how to stack plates with one hand. They drove past the clinic where the mural hands now looked less like pleading and more like holding. They drove to the motel where penguins marched across a screen and the coffee in the little machine tasted like dignity if you closed your eyes. In the morning, Maria went to the diner because choices stack and she wanted to keep them in order. Ronan followed because thunder sometimes needs accompaniment. Calloway sat in the van and pretended to read a newspaper. Lena bought a plant from the florist and put it on the clinic desk because apology should occasionally look like chlorophyll. The bell chimed. The busboy grinned like a test passed. The manager found a reason to apologize for yesterday very loudly near the register where everyone could hear. The cop came in and left a 20 under his bowl like absolution. Maria poured coffee with her left hand and almost forgot that it was new. She looked at Ronan with a question that had nothing to do with danger. "You ride out today?" she asked. He thought about the road and the way it can both heal and hide. He thought about Calloway's list of names and how lists get longer when you start pronouncing them out loud. He thought about a woman who could salt an engine and refuse a signature in the same 24 hours. "Not yet," he said. She nodded. "Good." She set a plate of pie in front of him. It was apple. It was honest. Outside, a spoon tapped on a saucer at a table no one had cleared. Once. Twice. 3 times. Ronan looked up. The man who had tapped was 80 if he was a day, with a veteran's cap and hands that shook from a history the room would never know. He smiled at Maria, embarrassed. Sugar, if you've got it. She laughed, pure and clean and unafraid. We do, she said, and walked to get it. Ronan watched the door, because he always would. He also watched her, because he wanted to. He felt the arc bend again, a little. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.